Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin.
I've always been the forgotten one in my family. It's funny how you can be in the same room, sit at the same table, and still feel like a ghost. I'm Emma Becker, 35 years old, the middle child of the most powerful ranching family in Texas. Roy Becker built Becker Cattle Company from scratch, making it one of the largest beef suppliers in the state. The company's his legacy, and he made sure everyone knew it. My older brother Caleb, 40, was always going to be the heir, the one who'd take over. My younger brother Jesse, 32, well, he was the charming screw-up, the one who could do no wrong in Dad's eyes, as long as he flashed that grin and didn't get too caught up in trouble. And then there was me, Emma, quiet, smart, capable, but never seen. For years, I worked behind the scenes, logistics, payroll, vendor deals, stuff that made everything run smoothly but didn't get me any attention. My brothers got their titles, their praise. Caleb was set to take over. Jesse was the family's golden boy. I just kept things going, in the background, invisible. And now, I was coming back for Thanksgiving dinner, expecting another round of smug remarks and ignored glances. Caleb greeted me first. Well, if it ain't the spreadsheet queen, he said, giving me that look, half amused, half condescending. Jesse followed, grinning like he just hit a jackpot. "You still playing cowgirl in the office?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. I didn't say a word. I'd learned the hard way that silence was the best response when you didn't matter enough to be taken seriously. So I just let them take their shots. Then Dad made his announcement over dinner. He didn't even flinch. "Sold it," he said, raising his glass. "Becker Cattle Co.'s gone. Sold for $38 million. The room went still. Caleb and Jesse looked at each other like it was some big win. They cheered as if they'd just inherited the thing. I felt the blood drain from my face, but I kept my cool. "Who bought it?" I asked, my voice steady despite the chaos bubbling inside me. Dad didn't hesitate. "Mesquite Ridge Holdings." I smiled. "I own Mesquite Ridge Holdings," I said, watching the room freeze. Caleb scoffed. Jesse laughed nervously, but his face froze when he saw the look on mine. Mom dropped her fork. The silence stretched out like it might never end. That Thanksgiving, the invisible daughter wasn't invisible anymore. The air went thick with the weight of what I'd just said. No one moved. Caleb stopped mid-cheer, his mouth hanging open like he couldn't quite process it. Jesse's laugh faded fast, turning into a sharp, awkward silence. Mom's fork slipped from her hand, clattering against her plate as she stared at me. I let the silence hang there, let them stew in it. Caleb was the first to recover, though not in a way I was expecting. He scoffed, eyes narrowing. "Right, you own it." "Sure, Emma." He tried to laugh it off, but the tension in his voice was already betraying him. "That's cute, but you really think you can pull this off?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't need to. I just looked at him, feeling the shift. For the first time, I had their attention. All those years of being the afterthought, gone. This was different. Jesse, still trying to process, blinked hard a few times, then just stared at me. His face flushed a little. "Wait. You? He stammered. He couldn't wrap his mind around it. "How'd you—" "Does it matter?" I cut him off, keeping my tone even. "It's done. I own it." Dad finally spoke, his voice low, almost cautious. "Emma, are you serious about this? I don't know what game you're playing here, but this isn't funny." I glanced over at him, and for the first time, I saw something that looked like a flicker of doubt in his eyes. Like he wasn't so sure anymore. "Oh, I'm serious, Dad. You sold it, and I bought it. That's the deal." Caleb's face twisted, and the anger started bubbling up. "You bought the company?" He practically spat the words like they tasted sour in his mouth. "How? What, did you get a loan or something?" I didn't blink. "It wasn't a loan, Caleb. It was my money, my company, my hard work." Jesse leaned back in his chair, looking like he was about to explode, then let out a short, strained laugh. "You really think we're supposed to believe this? That you—" He broke off, then looked at Dad as if trying to gauge his reaction. "This is a joke, right?" The disbelief on their faces was almost funny. Almost. I folded my arms, letting the tension linger. I guess it's easier to believe I'm lying than accept that I actually pulled it off. But here we are. Mom still hadn't moved, her eyes darting between me and Roy. She hadn't said a word. She was the quiet one in the family, always looking for a way to smooth things over. But tonight, nothing she could do would change the truth. Roy's face was set in that hard, impassive mask he wore when he didn't like what was happening. He cleared his throat and shot me a look that felt both cold and calculating. Who the hell is Mesquite Ridge Holdings anyway? Who's behind it? I could feel the power shift in the room. My voice stayed steady, but my insides were on fire. I am, I said simply. I'm the owner of Mesquite Ridge. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the clinking of silverware as Caleb and Jesse processed what I'd just dropped on them. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, trying to figure out how this fit into their idea of me. Quiet, efficient, always in the background, never the one in charge. Why the hell didn't you tell us? Caleb demanded. He was almost shouting now. You let us think everything was fine. You kept doing your little office thing, and now you steal the company out from under us? I didn't flinch. Steal? Number, I did what I needed to do. While you two were busy running the ranch into the ground, I built something, and now it's mine. Jesse's face turned a deeper shade of red. He shot up from his chair, fists clenched. You think we ran it into the ground? You think you know better than us? You've been hiding in your little office for how many years? Doing what? Playing secretary? I wasn't about to let him get away with that. I wasn't playing secretary, Jesse. I was keeping everything running. I solved your payroll messes. I made deals when you couldn't. And while you were busy spending money on bullshit, I was building a future. His jaw clenched, and for a second, I thought he might actually throw something. But Caleb got up before he could do anything else, slamming his fist on the table. You're full of shit, Emma. You've always been full of shit. You've been hiding behind your spreadsheets and acting like you're the one holding this family together. But it's our name on the ranch. It's our blood. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I just stood there, letting it all sink in. They were pissed. I could feel the heat from their anger, but I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever again. Roy was staring at me now, his face unreadable. So what? You're just going to take over? What does this mean for us? I could see Caleb and Jesse waiting for me to say something, desperate for an answer that would make it all go back to the way it was. But there was no going back. No, I said. This means I'm in charge now, and you two will have to reapply for your jobs. Roy's voice was low but harsh, cutting through the air like a knife. You're serious about this, Emma? You own the company that bought Becker Cattle Co.? I didn't flinch. I'm serious, Dad. I own it. Caleb's laugh was bitter, condescending. So what? You magically came up with $38 million. You think you can buy a ranch like this? With what? A paycheck from your little office job? Please. I let the weight of their disbelief settle, not bothering to explain myself right away. It wasn't their world to understand, but I would make them see. No, Caleb, I said, keeping my voice calm. I didn't get $38 million from my little office job. Let me walk you through how I got here. I turned my eyes to Roy, but spoke directly to the table. 10 years ago, I walked away from Becker Cattle Co. I'd been telling you both that the business was running off the rails, but you didn't want to hear it. You just wanted to stick to the same old ways, ignoring the cracks. So I left. I took what little savings I had and started my own company, a small livestock logistics firm. I paused for a moment, watching their faces. Caleb's had gone from mocking to just curious enough to stay quiet. Jesse, on the other hand, still looked confused, probably because he couldn't fathom me working for anything less than the family name. I spent the next few years working 20-hour days, I continued, living cheap, taking whatever jobs I could get. I'd consult for struggling ranches, help them optimize operations, figure out their logistics, get their costs down. I turned a profit in my first year, and I kept it going, even when it was tough. Hell, I went months without a real paycheck, just keeping my company afloat. Every penny I made went back into it. I let the words hang in the air for a second, letting them picture me, struggling, grinding away in ways they never had to. It must have stung. When I got to the point where I could scale it, I partnered with an agri-investment group. Together we started flipping distressed ranches, buying low, fixing them up, then selling them for profit. We did that for a few years, always looking for places where we could turn around operations. Roy's face was unreadable, but Caleb and Jesse were both leaning in now, intrigued despite themselves. I kept my head down, but I knew the game. I knew how the big money worked, so I learned. When the time came, I bought out one of the founding partners. I rebranded the company, took control, and made it my own. That's when Mesquite Ridge Holdings was born. I paused for a beat. You didn't think I'd make it, did you? I asked, eyes steady on my father. You told me I wasn't cut out for this business, but I was smarter than you thought. Roy's jaw tightened. He stared at me, not saying a word, but it was clear he was listening now. Really listening. And for the first time, maybe, he realized what I'd built in the silence of his disregard. So, for the last year, I've kept my eye on Becker Cattle, I continued. I watched it slowly slip. You had the name, but you were running it into the ground. You didn't want to innovate. You didn't want to change with the times. I saw the cracks, and when it was weak enough, I made an offer. Jesse blinked hard, still not quite getting it. Wait, you made an offer? Through intermediaries? You're telling me you didn't even deal directly with Dad? I didn't bother answering him, my focus still on Roy. You didn't even notice the name, did you, Dad? You never looked past Mesquite Ridge. You thought it was some faceless investor group, just a name on a paper. You didn't think it could be your daughter. Roy's face went pale. His eyes flickered, and I could almost see the moment it clicked in his mind. For all his success, his empire, he'd never thought to look closer at the one person who'd spent years making things run. The one person who actually understood how to save what they'd built. I didn't just buy a ranch, Dad, I said, leaning forward slightly. I bought Becker Cattle Co. I own everything now. The room was dead silent. It wasn't just the shock on their faces, it was the weight of everything I'd just said, everything I'd done, that was sinking in. Caleb, who'd been sitting back and watching, finally spoke. His voice was low and edged with something I hadn't heard from him in years, genuine uncertainty. So, what now, Emma? What do you expect from us? I glanced at him and then Jesse. I could see the pride and the bitterness in their eyes. The ownership wasn't just over a company. It was over everything they'd taken for granted, everything I'd been shoved out of. They hadn't even realized how much of the ranch had been slipping through their fingers. I expect you to earn it, I said simply. I expect you to earn your place. You'll reapply for your roles based on performance. No more free rides. Jesse's mouth dropped open, but I didn't wait for him to speak. And as for you, Dad, I said, meeting Roy's eyes, you'll stay on as an advisory figurehead. I need you to step aside. Your time's done. I wasn't sure if he was going to shout, argue, or tell me to leave. But he didn't. He just sat there, still and quiet, the weight of what I'd just taken from him finally sinking in. This was it. I had nothing left to prove. The ranch was mine now. Roy sat there, completely still, like I'd just slapped him across the face. Caleb and Jesse, on the other hand, were vibrating with anger. The smugness from before had melted into something darker, more dangerous. This is bullshit, Emma, Caleb growled, pushing his chair back. You can't just come in here and take everything like it's nothing. You're a snake. Jesse wasn't far behind. He stood up, fists clenched. This is what you've been planning all along. Revenge? I didn't flinch. I couldn't afford to. It's not revenge, Jesse, I said evenly. It's business. I reached over and pulled the stack of documents in front of me. Slowly, I began flipping through them. Signed contracts, wire transfer confirmations, company documents proving my ownership. I slid them across the table, one by one, watching them absorb the details as they realized I wasn't making any of this up. You see, I said, my voice flat, like I was talking to a child. It's all here. This is the deal. Everything's above board. I let Roy take it in, but Caleb and Jesse were too worked up. They didn't even look at the papers, just kept pacing, yelling. This isn't fair, Emma, Caleb shouted. We've been running this place for years, and you just swoop in and take it? This isn't how it's supposed to work. Jesse turned toward me, his face twisted in disbelief. How long have you been planning this? All this time? While we were busting our asses to keep the damn thing running? Busting your asses? I repeated, raising an eyebrow. I'm sure you had your hands full, Jesse. But you didn't run anything. You just kept the wheels turning until they started falling off. Enough, Roy cut in, his voice hoarse. He stood up from the table, pushing the papers away. He didn't want to look at them anymore. Didn't want to see the truth that had been staring him in the face. I don't care about the damn paperwork. This is family, Emma. You don't just... He trailed off, clearly struggling for words. I watched him, waiting. I wasn't going to back down. You always told me I wasn't cut out for this business, I said quietly. You both did. I glanced at Caleb and Jesse, my gaze sharp. But I built my own business. And now? Now I've bought yours. The room was heavy with the sting of that last line. The truth was out there, raw and undeniable, and it hurt them more than I'd expected. Caleb's face turned red, and he slammed his fist down on the table. You've destroyed everything, Emma. You took it from us. I didn't destroy anything, I replied, my voice steady, though my insides were a storm. You two did that, by running it into the ground while ignoring every single thing that went wrong. I just waited until it was my turn to step in. Jesse was staring at me like I was a stranger. His voice cracked a little when he spoke. I didn't think you'd do this. You really took it all. Everything, just to prove a point? I shook my head. It wasn't about proving a point, Jesse. It was about surviving. I did what you and Caleb couldn't, kept things running when it looked like everything was falling apart. There was a long, tense silence. Caleb, fists still clenched, glared at me like he wanted to tear the room apart. But I didn't back down. Roy looked between all of us before finally sitting back down. He sighed, rubbing his face with both hands like he was trying to work through the mess. So what now? He asked, voice quieter. What are you going to do with us? I held my ground. You, Dad, will stay on as an advisory figurehead. You'll keep your place on the ranch, but your role's done. Caleb and Jesse will reapply for their jobs. Based on performance, I met their eyes, directly, no hesitation. I'm not handing out positions just because you have a name. If you want to work here, you'll earn it. Jesse's eyes shifted between me and Caleb, unsure of what to say. He opened his mouth, but Caleb beat him to it, his voice low and furious. You've made a goddamn mockery of everything we've worked for, Emma. I'm not going to let you ruin this family. I could feel the tension peak, the weight of everything finally breaking through the surface. But I didn't let it rattle me. I'm not ruining the family, Caleb, I said, my voice cold. I'm just taking my place in it. I'm doing what none of you ever gave me a chance to do. Roy stood again, shaking his head as if trying to process it all. Then, without another word, he walked to the back door, gesturing for me to follow. I followed him outside, leaving Caleb and Jesse behind, their heated words fading as the door swung shut. We stood in silence for a few moments, the cool night air mixing with the weight of the conversation. Roy didn't look at me, his back to me as he stared off across the ranch. Emma, he said after a long pause, his voice more tired than angry, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say something sooner? I took a breath before answering. Because you never gave me a chance. You told me I wasn't made for this. And when I walked away to build my own future, you didn't even notice. Roy didn't respond immediately, just let the words sink in. Finally, he turned to me, his expression softer now, but still unreadable. I never saw it. I was too busy looking at everything else. I nodded. I know. That's why I did it without you. Roy was quiet for a moment longer. Then, slowly, he sighed and placed a hand on my shoulder. All right, Emma, I accept it. You've done what I couldn't. I'll step aside. But I'll be here, if you need me. I didn't need him to tell me that. But it meant something, hearing him finally admit it. Thanks, Dad, I said quietly. He gave a tight nod. And just like that, everything changed. The next morning, I sat at the small desk in the office trailer, just off the main ranch site, my laptop open in front of me. The words on the screen still felt surreal. Mesquite Ridge Holdings acquires Becker Cattle Co. I hit send on the press release and watched the notification pop up confirming it had gone live. Within minutes, the emails started flooding in. Whispers of the acquisition were already circulating across the ranch. Some people were confused, some scared. Most didn't know who I was yet. They'd heard the name Mesquite Ridge, but they didn't know I was the one behind it. I couldn't afford to sit back and let the chaos take over. I stood up and grabbed my jacket, walking out of the trailer and toward the main office building. There was work to do. I wasn't about to waste time while the place spun its wheels. My first supervisor meeting was scheduled for 8:30, and I wasn't going to be late. I walked into the conference room, flanked by Gina, who handled operations, and Mark, who was handling ranch transitions for me. Both of them were solid, smart, experienced, and, most importantly, loyal. We were ready for this. The supervisors, mostly mid-level managers, were already seated. Their faces ranged from curious to skeptical, the usual mix when something like this happens. They all knew Roy's name, but they didn't know mine. Morning, I said, keeping my tone firm but calm. I didn't have time for pleasantries. Let's get right into it. First off, nobody's losing their job today. There were murmurs. The room relaxed a little, but not much. They were still on edge. I'm not here to make changes for the sake of making changes, I continued, pacing a little to let my words settle. But this place is falling apart. We have to fix safety issues, stop wasting money, address delivery delays, and rebuild vendor trust. If we don't fix those problems, we're going to keep sliding into the red. Mark flipped open a folder with some reports. I noticed a couple of them glance at each other, probably wondering if they were about to be blamed for all the things I just listed. I paused, waiting for the room to quiet. I'm not blaming anyone here. I'm just telling you what needs to happen. If you want to keep your job, you'll have to meet the performance standards I set. No excuses. I turned to Gina. We'll be conducting a safety audit next week. I want it done right. We've got too many near misses, and that has to stop. We'll also be revamping our waste management processes. Mark, I want you working on a strategy for better tracking of inventory, everything from feed to equipment. They all nodded, but I could see the hesitation on their faces. I know it's going to be a tough shift, but it's necessary, I said. We're going to streamline the operation. That's not optional. I'm sure there's some resistance, and that's fine. But if you're with me, we'll make this work. Gina raised her hand, always the cautious one. Emma, do we have the funds to implement these changes? I froze for a moment, then glanced at Mark. The books had been a mess since I started looking at them. The numbers didn't add up. There were late bills, overinflated invoices for consulting services I couldn't find any records of. I'm going to freeze all non-critical spending, I said, trying to keep the tension out of my voice. We'll be looking at every expense in detail over the next few weeks. Yeah, well, one of the supervisors said, raising an eyebrow. That's going to be hard to do when the vendors are already pulling out. Some of them aren't happy with the delays we've had. They've been saying they won't supply us unless we get things under control. I didn't flinch. I know. We'll be addressing that with the vendors directly. I'm scheduling an all-hands meeting for tomorrow morning. I want transparency, and I want to restore their faith in us. The supervisors exchanged looks. Some of them seemed relieved. Others looked like they were still wondering if this was just another round of empty promises. I kept going. This company has been running on fumes for too long. We need to get our act together if we want to survive. You've all been here longer than I have, so I need you to trust that I'm not going to let this fail. The room was quieter now, and I could see a few of them nodding, maybe even believing it. But there was still a lot of work to do. I wasn't about to back off. The meeting wrapped up with the usual rounds of, we'll try our best, and thanks for your time. But as I stood to leave, I could feel the weight of what was ahead of me settling in. Walking back to my office, I looked out across the ranch. I had a long road ahead, and I was just getting started. One step at a time, one decision at a time. The feed barn was packed, about 150 ranch employees, all gathered in one of the most iconic places on the ranch. It smelled like hay and sweat, a reminder of how hard these people worked every day. Word had spread like wildfire. The new owner of Becker Cattle was Roy's daughter, me. I stepped up to the makeshift stage, a microphone in my hand. The room fell quiet, all eyes on me. The air felt thick with uncertainty. I wasn't used to being the center of attention, but there was no going back now. I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of the moment, but I had to push through. I know you've heard the news, I started, my voice shaking just a little. I'm Emma Becker, and yes, I'm your new boss. I saw a few heads nod, others just staring at me like they were waiting for me to say something that would make sense of it all. I took a breath. I'm not here to talk about ownership or where the money's going. I'm here to talk about you. You are the ones who make this ranch run. Not a name on a gate, not some fancy press release. You. There was a slight shift in the room. A few eyes softened, and I could see the skeptical ones still waiting for the punchline. They weren't ready to trust me yet, and I wasn't going to blame them for it. I'm here to make sure this place works, for all of you, I continued. I know things haven't been great lately, but I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. I'm going to tell you exactly what we're going to do to get this place back on track. I glanced down at my notes, but I didn't need them. I knew what I had to say. First off, I'm making a promise. No layoffs for the next 90 days. But, and I need you to hear this, only if we hit safety and quality targets. That means no cutting corners, no more excuses. This ranch survives because of the people working it. If we do the right things, we keep the jobs we've got. Simple as that. I paused, letting the words sink in. Some of them were looking at each other, quietly nodding, but I could feel the tension from others, the ones who weren't sure yet. I wasn't expecting them to trust me, not right away. I'm also setting some new ground rules, I said, pulling up a chart on the screen behind me. We're going to have daily safety briefings, no exceptions. If you're not in that meeting, you're not working that day. Safety's the first priority. I glanced around the barn, seeing people start to engage, if only a little. This wasn't just about words. It was about actions. And I was going to back every word up with what I did next. We're also going to streamline our operations. I'll be putting in place a $50 bounty for any idea that saves time or cuts waste. You know this ranch better than anyone. If you've got a way to make things work more efficiently, you'll get paid for it. That got some attention. A few heads turned, and I could tell they were starting to listen. The $50 bounty wasn't much, but it was enough to get them thinking, get them invested in the changes I was bringing. Then came the tough part. A voice from the back of the barn cut through the murmurs. Why should we trust you? The question was sharp, coming from a woman who looked like she could throw a punch as easily as she could rope a calf. Carla, a tough wrangler. I hadn't seen her around much, but her reputation preceded her. I met her eyes, unflinching. Because I'm putting everything in writing. No more guessing games. No more. We'll see what happens. You'll know exactly what's expected of you. And you'll know exactly what I expect from myself, too. There was a beat of silence, then a small, uncertain clap from somewhere in the back. It was quiet at first, but then it started to build. Slowly, like a tide coming in. By the time it reached the front, it was a full round of applause. It wasn't huge, but it was real. I let it sink in before I continued. I'm not asking for your trust today. I'm asking for your effort. If we all show up, do the work, and hold each other accountable, we'll make it through. We'll make it better than it's ever been. I could see Caleb and Jesse standing by the door at the back of the barn, arms crossed, both of them watching with scowls on their faces. They didn't clap. They didn't even react. They just stood there like they were waiting for me to fail. But I wasn't here for them. Not anymore. I wrapped up the meeting with a few more specifics. Plans for improving equipment maintenance, a new vendor meeting to restore relationships, and told them we'd be setting up one-on-one meetings for the next few weeks to get their feedback on the changes. We're all in this together, I finished. And the only way this ranch survives is if we all commit to making it better. You've got a job, I've got a plan. Let's make it happen. As I walked off the stage, I could feel the weight of everything pushing down on me. The room had shifted just a little. Maybe it wasn't all trust yet, but it was a start. And that was enough. The applause faded, but the murmurs continued as the employees began to file out. Caleb and Jesse stayed behind, still scowling, their arms crossed. I didn't need to say anything to them. They'd see the change, whether they liked it or not. I had just made it back to my office when the door slammed open behind me. Caleb and Jesse stood there, both of them glaring like they'd been waiting for me to come back and face them. The air between us was thick, two pissed-off brothers who were about to lay into me. You humiliated us in front of everyone. Caleb spat, voice low but seething. That stunt at the town hall? What the hell was that? I didn't turn around right away. I stayed at my desk, reading through a few reports. They could wait. The more I showed them I wasn't intimidated, the less power they'd have. I finally stood and faced them, keeping my voice calm. It wasn't humiliation. It was the truth you didn't want to hear. Jesse ran a hand through his hair, looking like he was trying to process everything. You really think we're just going to sit back and watch you? Take over? Like that? He shook his head. You think we're going to take this lying down? I reached into my drawer, pulled out 2 sealed envelopes, and slid them across the desk to them. You have options, I said, my voice steady. Option 1. You take paid leave, effective immediately. We'll reassess your roles in 30 days. Option 2. You resign with a package and you leave. Your choice. Caleb's expression darkened as he reached for the envelope, only to stop short, his hand hovering over it. I'm not taking a damn thing from you, he growled. This is our ranch. You don't get to just... I cut him off before he could finish. Take the envelope, Caleb. You don't have to take anything. But if you don't, I'll proceed with an internal investigation into the expenses that don't add up. And why a vendor pulled out after a dinner meeting at a bar you charged to the company card? The silence hit like a slap. Jesse's face twisted and Caleb's turned crimson. The way his jaw clenched, I could almost see the gears grinding in his mind. He knew I had him. What? Jesse asked, his voice a little shakier now. What do you mean? What the hell are you talking about? I didn't flinch. You know exactly what I'm talking about. The dinner with the vendor. The one you charged to the company card. I emphasized the last part. I've seen the receipts, Caleb. The kind of expenses that don't belong in a ranch budget. And that's just one of many things I'm digging into. Jesse glanced over at Caleb, whose face was a deep shade of red now. He looked like he might blow a gasket, but instead, he stayed still, glaring at me. You're a goddamn snake, Caleb hissed. You've been waiting for this moment, haven't you? Biding your time until you could pull the rug out from under us. I didn't pull anything, Caleb, I said calmly. You've been taking advantage of this company for years. I'm just the one who's holding you accountable for it. You've had your chance. Jesse, after a long pause, broke eye contact with Caleb and looked at the envelope. His hand hovered over it like he was weighing the decision. He hesitated, clearly torn. Finally, with a sharp exhale, he picked up the envelope, opened it, and looked at the offer inside. Paid leave, he muttered under his breath, rubbing his forehead. I'll take it. I need time to think. I nodded, keeping my face neutral. Smart choice. I'll have HR set it up. Caleb, though, was a different story. His hands were balled into fists and his eyes were burning with anger. He didn't even look at the envelope. I'm not taking a damn thing from you, he said, turning on his heel. You want to investigate me? Go ahead. I'm not going anywhere. Jesse looked at Caleb one last time before he turned to leave with his envelope in hand. I'll take the leave, he said, a bit too forcefully. He didn't wait for Caleb. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't need to. I knew what I had to do, and I knew what was coming next. Once they were gone, I hit the intercom button. Maya, can you come in here for a second? I asked, keeping my tone calm but decisive. A few moments later, Maya walked in, her expression unreadable. What's up? She asked. I didn't waste time. That's 2 on ice, I said flatly. Caleb's out. Jesse's on leave. I want full access to their expenses and everything related to the vendors. Get me the documentation. All of it. Maya raised an eyebrow but nodded. Understood. I didn't have time to explain myself further. Caleb and Jesse were on their own now. The ranch needed change, and I was the one who was going to see it through. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the door they had just walked through. It was all happening faster than I had expected, but I wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not ever again. 2 weeks passed, and I started to see the shift. It was slow, like trying to turn an old, rusted machine, but the gears were starting to turn. Vendor payments were finally caught up. We weren't behind on bills anymore, and the angry calls from suppliers had stopped. Delivery targets were getting hit more consistently, and for the first time in years, we weren't running on the brink of disaster. Safety complaints, which had been through the roof before, were starting to drop. Employees were beginning to trust me. It wasn't all of them, but it was enough. Some of the older hands, the ones who had been there longer than I'd been alive, still kept their distance, not fully convinced. They didn't like the changes I was making, the systems I was putting in place. But there was a core group that was buying in. They could see the results, even if they weren't ready to say it out loud yet. One of those was Carla, the wrangler who'd asked me the tough question at the town hall. She came up to me one morning, a piece of paper in her hand, and I could tell she had something important to say. You know that old corral setup? She asked. The one where we're always running into delays with loading and unloading? I've been thinking about it. I've got a new way to save time, but it's going to need a little adjustment. I raised an eyebrow, interested. Go on. Carla explained the plan in detail, showing how we could use a different angle for the cattle pens, cutting the load-in time by half. I could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just talking, she was solving a problem, and it was a good idea. All right, I said, pulling out my wallet. I didn't waste time. You're going to get paid for this, $50, right now. She looked surprised but didn't argue, taking the cash without hesitation. Thanks, Emma. I appreciate it. I nodded. We're going to keep doing this. If it saves us time and money, it's worth it. She walked off looking pleased. That was what I needed. Small wins, momentum. The more I could get people to contribute, the more they'd feel invested in the changes. But not everyone was on board. The resistance was mostly from those who had thrived under the old way, the ones who'd gotten comfortable with the chaos, the ones who didn't want structure or accountability. I wasn't here to convince them. I couldn't. They were stuck in their ways, and I wasn't wasting my energy on people who didn't want to move forward. The real work was happening with the ones who saw the potential, who saw the light at the end of the tunnel, and they were starting to speak up. One afternoon, I got an unexpected visit in the middle of a floor update. Roy showed up, boots on, jacket zipped up against the chill. He didn't say anything as he walked in, just stood quietly at the back, arms crossed, observing. The team was used to these updates by now, but there was an edge to this one. Everyone knew who Roy was, and they knew why he was here. It was different now. The ranch wasn't his anymore. It was mine. I didn't let it throw me off. I took the mic and gave a quick rundown of our progress. How we'd caught up on vendor payments, how safety and delivery targets had been improving, how Carla's idea had already started saving time. I laid out a few other initiatives that were on track, and then I took a breath and looked around the room. We've still got work to do, but we're moving in the right direction. And we're going to keep pushing. We're not slowing down. Roy stayed quiet the whole time, just watching. When the meeting wrapped up and people started to file out, he stayed behind. I wasn't sure what to expect. He had been distant, mostly leaving me to manage everything. But today was different. He walked up to me slowly, his boots making the familiar sound on the concrete floor. "Emma," he said quietly, "you've done more in 3 weeks than Caleb did in 3 years." I didn't know how to respond at first. His words, simple, honest, struck me more than I wanted to admit. "Thanks, Dad," I said, not looking away. He took a deep breath, like the weight of everything was finally coming down on him. "I should have seen it, should have given you a chance." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I thought nobody in the family had the guts to save it, but I think I was wrong." There it was, the truth. I didn't need anything more from him. "I'm not done yet," I said, voice low but steady. "We're just getting started." Roy nodded slowly, his gaze shifting to the floor as if he was seeing the ranch in a new light. "You've got the guts all right, just don't let up." I wasn't planning to. There was too much at stake now. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about proving that I could do this, not just for me, but for everyone who depended on this place. Roy turned to leave, but before he reached the door, he glanced back at me. "One more thing," he said, almost as an afterthought. "I didn't sell it to get out of the game. I sold it because I didn't think it could be saved. But now," he paused, eyes meeting mine. "Maybe it wasn't the company that was broken. Maybe it was just the way we were running it." I didn't have an answer for him right then. But hearing that from him felt like a small victory in itself. For the first time, maybe, he saw me as more than just his daughter. He saw me as the one who could turn it all around. 3 months later, I stood in the middle of the ranch office, staring out the window at the land I'd spent my whole life watching from the sidelines. Now it was mine, and for the first time in years, Becker Cattle Co. was in the black. Profit margins were climbing, and employee turnover was down. The changes were working. The hard part was over, or at least that's what I told myself. I glanced down at the financial reports on my desk, the numbers confirming what I already knew. We had momentum. But there was still the matter of Caleb and Jesse, the last loose ends I needed to tie up. I called them in for a final sit-down. They'd been avoiding me, and I hadn't made it easy on them. I'd taken steps to clean up the books, to fix what they'd broken, but I wasn't about to let them skate by, not when I knew the kind of damage they'd caused. Caleb was the first to walk in. He didn't greet me, just dropped into the chair across from my desk, arms crossed. His eyes were dark, but the anger was there. Jesse followed, more subdued, but still wearing that same wary expression. I didn't waste time. I slid a folder across the desk to them. "Full financial report and investigation findings," I said, my voice flat. "You can take your time reading it, but I don't need to spell out what's in there. The numbers are clear." Caleb immediately flipped it open, scanning through the documents with a sneer on his face. "Still trying to threaten us?" he muttered, eyes not lifting from the paper. He was trying to dismiss it, but I saw his jaw tighten. He didn't like what he was reading. Jesse, on the other hand, was quieter. He looked at the folder, then at me. "You really dug into everything, huh?" His voice was low, almost resigned. I stayed calm. "I did what needed to be done. You both had a hand in how this place got to where it was. You can ignore the facts if you want, but they're there." Caleb slammed the folder shut, looking at me like I'd just personally wronged him. "You're not going to get away with this? You think you can just take everything from us, Emma?" I didn't blink. "Either you stay off the property, or I take legal action. I'll involve lawyers if I have to. You're not part of this operation anymore." The room went still for a second, and I could feel the weight of the choice hanging in the air. Caleb's nostrils flared, But Jesse didn't say a word. His eyes were downcast, the fight gone out of him. After a long pause, Jesse reached for the envelope in front of him, his fingers trembling just a little. "I'm done," he said quietly, without making eye contact. "I've already lined up something out of state." Caleb's head snapped toward him, eyes wide. "What? You're just going to walk away from all of this?" Jesse didn't look at him. "Yeah, I'm walking away. It's better this way." I watched as Jesse signed his resignation, handing it over without any fanfare. The tension between the two of them was palpable, but Jesse didn't seem to care anymore. He was done. Caleb, on the other hand, was seething. His face was flushed with rage. "You think you've won?" he spat, standing up so suddenly that his chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You're nothing but a damn traitor, Emma. You're not fit to run this place. And when I'm gone, you'll see how far your little empire goes." I didn't respond, just stared him down. He glared at me, but there was nothing left to say. His fists were clenched, his breath ragged with anger. And then, without another word, he turned and stormed out of my office, slamming the door behind him with a force that rattled the walls. I let out a breath, leaning back in my chair. One down, one to go. I wasn't surprised by Caleb's reaction. He'd always been the one who expected the world to hand him everything. Jesse, on the other hand, had always been the one who had the potential to do something different, but never quite enough drive to see it through. It wasn't my job to fix them. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. Later that afternoon, Roy came out to the horse paddock, where I'd been checking on some of the new livestock. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there in silence beside me, watching the horses graze. "Those two are gone now," he said, his voice rough. I nodded, feeling the weight of it. "Yeah, it's done." Roy rubbed his jaw, his gaze still fixed on the horses. "You've done more in 3 weeks than Caleb did in 3 years, he said, his voice quieter than usual. I didn't think it was possible. I didn't think anyone could fix this. I didn't look at him, just kept my eyes on the field. "I didn't fix anything, Dad. I just kept it running long enough to make the changes. There's still a lot to do." He was quiet for a moment, then spoke again, almost as an afterthought. "I thought nobody in the family had the guts to save it, but maybe I was wrong." I didn't need his praise, not anymore. But hearing him admit that meant something. I didn't answer right away, just nodded. "I didn't do it for you," I said, my voice steady but quiet. "I did it for this ranch, for everyone who works here. That's all that matters." Roy didn't respond. He just nodded, a rare moment of quiet pride between us. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about doing the work, step by step. And for the first time in my life, I knew I was on the right path. The evening was clear and cool, the kind of spring night that made the world feel a little lighter. I left the office early, heading for my mother's house for Sunday dinner. I hadn't been there in a while, not since everything had turned around. I needed a break from the grind, even if it was just for a few hours. Mom had the table set when I walked in, the scent of roast chicken and fresh bread filling the air. She greeted me with that smile of hers, the kind that said everything was normal, even if it hadn't been for a long time. We talked about little things, how the garden was coming along, how the weather was shaping up for the summer, things that didn't matter as much as what was happening on the ranch. But in the moment, it felt good to focus on something else. Roy showed up late, his boots dragging a little as he came through the door. His clothes were dusted with sawdust, his hands rough from working on a new piece of furniture. His latest hobby. I couldn't remember the last time I'd seen him this relaxed. He'd been making a small rocking chair for Mom, something he'd always promised he'd do when he retired. Dinner was easy, no tension, no power plays, just family sitting together, eating, talking about nothing and everything. It wasn't perfect, but for the first time in a long while, it felt like we were all on the same page. As the meal wound down, Roy lifted his glass. "To the ranch," he said, voice rough but sincere. "Still in the family." I clinked my glass against his, meeting his eyes. Still in the family. It wasn't just a toast. It was something deeper, something I'd fought for. Not just the ranch, but for the family, for the place that had shaped everything about me. I didn't need to prove anything to Roy anymore. I had nothing to prove to anyone. After dinner, I stepped outside, the cool air hitting my face as I walked through the yard. I didn't need a map to find my way. My feet knew the path better than my mind did. I walked past the barn, the corral, the old fence line, and then I stopped. I stood there, letting the stillness settle over me. I looked out at the land, the ranch that had been so close to slipping through my fingers. It wasn't perfect, but it was steady now. The chaos had finally given way to something that felt like real control. Not the kind that came from power, but the kind that came from doing the work day in and day out. The kind that gave you peace when the day ended. I remembered Thanksgiving, the night I'd walked into that house expecting to be ignored again, to be pushed aside. I remembered the cold silence when I revealed I'd bought the ranch. All that pent-up resentment, that anger, it had driven me to that point. But standing there now, in the quiet of the ranch, I realized it hadn't just been about revenge. Buying the ranch had been about redemption. Rebuilding it had been about proving to myself that I could take what was broken and make it work again. That I could trust myself enough to make the hard decisions, even when everyone else was telling me I wasn't cut out for it. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right, every single day since that Thanksgiving night. And for the first time, I could feel the weight of everything I had done settle into place. The ranch was mine, the future was mine, and I was finally ready to keep it that way.